Hi friends, my name is Krishna Akumalla. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In our previous video, we discussed about the importance of inventory valuation, significance of inventory valuation, I can say. Why should we do the inventory valuation? If I do incorrect valuation, what happens? How that is going to impact on our financial statements? These are the things we discussed in our previous video. In today's video, we are going to discuss about the basis of valuation. On what basis we do the valuation. Methods of valuation is something else that also we are going to discuss. But right now in this video, what we are going to discuss is basis of valuation of inventories. Right? Without wasting much time, let us get into the presentation. Okay? Okay, guys. We are going to discuss the basis of inventory valuation in this video. Right? What should be the basis? It looks very simple statement to understand the basis. Very simple statement. You know what is that? Cost or net realizable value, whichever is lower, has to be considered for valuation of inventory. Cost or net realizable value, whichever is lower, has to be considered for inventory valuation. Such a simple statement, right? Is there any difficulty to understand here? Either while doing valuation, what you need to do, you need to consider two components. One is cost you need to take, other one is net realizable value. In these two components, whichever is lower, you need to consider for valuation purpose. Very simple. But that is not that easy. You need to understand what do you mean by cost, what are the components you need to take into account for cost, and what are the components you need to take into account for net realizable value. That plays a vital role here. It looks very simple to say cost or net realizable value, whichever is less. But do you know what is net realizable value? Let us understand that. Net realizable value has to be considered in three different components. For example, if I take raw materials into account, what should be the net realizable value? We'll talk about cost later. Let us first talk about net realizable value. In case of raw materials, what should be the net realizable value we need to take? In case you have 1 lakh worth of raw material in our godown, right? What is the net realizable value? If you want to replace this raw material, at what rate you are going to get? That should be your net realizable value for raw materials. So for raw materials, what is the net realizable value? Replacement cost. Simple. Replacement cost is the net realizable value for raw materials. Are you clear? Let us go to work in progress. In case of work in progress, what should be the net realizable value? You need to take, in case of work in progress, expenses and overheads required to be incurred to convert WIP into finished goods. WIP has to be converted into finished goods, right? Right? So if you want to convert WIP into finished goods, what is the cost required to be incurred? What is the cost to be incurred to convert them into finished goods? You need to take that cost into account and making it ready for sale to be reduced from selling price. So whatever expenses and overheads required to be incurred to convert WIP into finished goods and making it ready for sale to be reduced from the selling price. So what you need to do, you need to take the selling price of this WIP and you need to reduce the conversion cost. Conversion cost from WIP to finished goods and whatever expenses you you need to incur for selling them as well. That also you need to take into account and reduce that from the selling price, and then you will take that as a net realizable value. Getting my point? Very simple. Whatever cost required to be incurred for converting WIP into finished goods and make them into sellable position, that cost has to be reduced from the selling price of this. Then you will get what should be your net realizable value for WIP. Are you clear? Anyway, we are going to have all these illustrations with examples, so don't worry about that. So right now what you need to understand is, how do I get the net realizable value for WIP? Very simple. Whatever conversion cost required to convert from WIP to finished product and make them into sellable, expenditure has to be reduced from your selling price. So selling price minus conversion cost and selling expenses. From this selling expenses, if you could reduce this to conversion cost and selling expenses, whatever price you get, that will be considered as net realizable value. That will be considered as net realizable value. Are you clear? Next, raw material, we understood what should be the net realizable value. We understood what is the net realizable value for WIP. Then what should be the net realizable value for finished goods? That also we need to look into account, right? So for finished goods, what you need to take? Selling price minus selling and distribution expenses. Finished goods, what should be the selling price you need to take into account? Finished goods can be a tradable goods as well. So whatever selling price you are supposed to sell in the ordinary course of business, you need to take that selling price minus selling and distribution expenses. You need to reduce, and you get whatever price here, that price will be considered as a net realizable value. So net realizable value differs from each component. For raw materials, there is a way you need to consider. For WIP, there is a way you need to consider. For finished goods, there is a way you need to consider, right? So all the three components, you should know how to calculate net realizable value. That is the reason I explained the method of basis to be followed for valuation of the inventory in terms of raw materials, finished goods, and WIP. Now, what should be the cost? Now you understood how to arrive the net realizable value. We will do all the illustrations. Institute has given several examples. We are going to work on all those cases. Theoretically, what you need to understand in this video is, boss, how do I know my net realizable value? For raw materials, this is how you need to calculate. For finished goods, this is how you need to calculate. For WIP, this is how you need to calculate. If you could know in this video, that is enough. We are going to have examples and some illustrations going to come. Right now we understood what is net realizable value. Let us understand how to calculate the cost. So what is that we need to see when we are talking about the basis of valuation? You need to consider the cost of purchase. You need to consider the cost of purchase, and you need to understand what is the cost of conversion and what are the other costs. These are all the components we need to take as a part of cost. So there are two components for valuation, two bases. What are they? One is cost, other one is net realizable value. Correct? This we have discussed. Net realizable value we discussed. How? For raw material, how we need to do. For WIP, how we need to calculate. For finished product, how we need to do. That we have done already. Now, for cost, we need to calculate, right? For that, we have to understand three components. One is cost of purchase. What do you mean by cost of purchase? Number two, cost of conversion. Number three, other costs. If you know these three components, you will get to know the cost. Here also the same way, right? For net realizable value also, how did you calculate? You have to separate them. Raw material, how I calculate. For WIP, how I calculate. For finished product, how I calculate. That is how you calculate it, right? Similar way for cost also, you need to take three components into account. One is cost of purchase. How do you calculate cost of purchase? Second one, you should know how to calculate the cost of conversion, and what are the other costs to be taken into account to arrive the cost. Once you arrive the cost, then you need to compare cost versus net realizable value, whichever is lower, to be considered for the inventory valuation. Are you clear so far? Right. Let me clean this up, then we will go to each topic here. What are the costs we need to take into account here? That is something which we need to understand. First one is cost of purchase. Whatever cost we incurred for purchasing the raw materials need to be taken into account. For example, what and all the cost of purchase, raw material cost price will be there anyway, that we have to take into account. Apart from that, you need to take duties and taxes. Any GST or VAT or any taxes we paid, that also need to be taken into account. But one caveat here is, when we are taking taxes into account, see, for example, raw material is, let us say, 1,000 rupees. RM cost, RM price is 1,000 rupees. I'm just taking an example. Let us say 10 rupees you paid for taxes. So then you need to take 1,010 rupees is the cost. But while taking this 10 rupees, what you need to keep in mind is, first, if I take this 10 rupees, am I getting any refund for this 10 from either government authorities or from my suppliers? If you are getting refund from government authorities, this should not be taken into account as a part of cost, because that is not a cost for you if that is refunded. Am I right or wrong? If this 10 is incurred by you, then you can consider that as a cost, or you can include them in the raw material cost. But if the 10 is going to be refunded by the government authorities, then this is not a cost for you. You are recovering it. When you are recovering it, you should not consider this as a cost. So when you are taking the taxes into account, what you need to keep in mind is, whatever taxes I'm paying, whether these taxes are going to be refunded by authorities. If they are refunding, then you should not take. If they are not refunding, then you have to include them as a part of cost of purchase. I hope you understand this point. Next, freight inwards. Whatever freight you have to pay for bringing raw materials to your manufacturing unit, that freight has to be taken into account. That freight has to be included as a part of your cost of purchase. I hope you understand this point. And other expenditure directly attributable to the purchase. Any other expenses directly attributable to the purchase, you need to, whatever expenses you are incurring to bring the raw material from the supplier location to your manufacturer location, whatever expenses you incur, that has to be taken into account. While taking this, there are some exclusions you need to take into account. So you have to take taxes, you have to take freight, you are supposed to take some more expenses, whatever directly attributable to the purchase. These are the three components need to be added to the raw material cost. Let me explain properly once again here. For example, if I take raw material price, purchase price, so this is the RM price, and you need to add taxes provided they are not refunded, and then other expenses directly attributable to purchase you need to take into account. Then this will be the total cost, right? From this, you need to take freights as well. Sorry, you need to take freight also into account. All those expenses you need to take into, add this. In this, what and all you need to exclude? Most important, you should not consider trade discount. This I already explained in my previous video. Why trade discount is not supposed to be included. Please go through my previous videos, you will get to know. In subsidiary books chapters, I explained the importance of trade discount, and I compared trade discount with the cash discount as well. So please go through those videos. You will get to know about why we should not take trade discount into account, right? So trade discount we should exclude. So here we need to minus them. Trade discount we need to reduce. And you need to reduce duty drawbacks and rebates. What do you mean by duty drawback and rebates? Duty drawbacks are, for example, if I'm importing some raw material from abroad, so there are some customs duties and excess duties I'm supposed to pay. So when I'm importing some of the goods from from abroad, what will happen? Government authorities will give some duty drawbacks to us, some refunds for us. To encourage the imports, to encourage the exports, what they do, they give some duty drawbacks and rebates for us. In case if government is giving any concession or rebate or discount or refund, those things also to be deducted from here. Because if they are saying that, okay, you pay the customs duty, but government said, don't worry, that customs duty, whatever you paid, I will refund it. Government can say, you pay the excess duty for importing this raw material, I will do the exemption for I will give you the exemption for this excess duty. You pay and you get the refund from government authorities. If you are getting the duty drawbacks from authorities, then that is not an expenditure for you, right? You are going to get the refund from the government. When you are getting the refund from government authorities, that is not an expenditure, and you should not include them as a part of your cost. So then those expenses have to be reduced from your raw material cost. So raw material price plus taxes, freight, other expenditure, minus trade discount, minus duty drawbacks and rebates have to be reduced, and you should arrive what should be your net cost to be taken into account. Are you clear so far? Right. Then let me clean this, and then we will go to the cost of conversion. What do you mean by cost of conversion? Suppose if I have work in progress in place, this work in progress will be has to be converted into finished product, right? So whatever conversion cost I'm supposed to pay for converting WIP into finished goods has to be taken into account, right? So what are those expenses? For example, cost of conversion, if I take into account here, example, direct labor and systematic allocation of fixed and variable overheads has to be taken into account. What are those, direct labor? Direct labor, anyway, we all know. What is the direct labor? Whatever labor involved in converting our raw materials or WIP into finished product is a direct labor. Am I right or wrong? I need to bring a labor who can convert this raw materials and WIP into finished product, right? So that labor cost is called as direct labor. So that has to be taken into account, right? Then systematic allocation of fixed overheads and variable overheads. What do you mean by fixed overheads and variable overheads? You need to understand that. Fixed overheads are salaries. They are all fixed. Every month you have to pay the salaries. Rent, you have to pay month on no fixed. Rent has to be paid on monthly basis. Property taxes, it is fixed. You have to pay property tax on month, off yearly or yearly basis. Then depreciation on assets, it is fixed. If you are following the straight line method, the depreciation on each asset is going to be the same. And government licenses, if any, has to be license fees has to be paid. That also will be considered as a fixed overhead. So these are all fixed overheads. These fixed overheads also to be allocated systematically. There should be some basis for allocating those fixed overheads. So the basis of allocating the fixed overheads also to be taken into account for cost of conversion purpose. Are you getting my point? Similar way, variable overheads. What are the variable overheads? Variable overheads, we all know what and all will come. Raw material cost. It is a variable overhead. As and when you keep purchasing raw materials, the prices or the cost will keep increasing or decreasing. For example, if I buy 1000 kgs of raw material today, my cost will be to the extent of 1000 kgs. If I buy 2000 kgs of raw material, my raw material cost will increase to that extent from 1000 to 2000. Am I right or wrong? So it keeps varying, depends on the number of goods I purchase, number of raw materials I purchase. Am I right or wrong? So raw materials will be a variable cost. Same way labor also, it is daily wages. Wages we call it as wages. If there is no production today, I don't hire anybody. If there is a huge production, I hire excess labor for processing. So labor cost is also variable cost from, but salaries is not a variable cost, because salary is a fixed amount. Those employees are continue to be there in the organization whether you produce or you don't produce. But labor is not like that. Labor cost will be paid only when there is a production. Suppose if I ordinarily process 1000 kgs in a day, so accordingly I hire people. and they produce 1000 kgs and go. For example, if I have too many orders today, I have to produce 2000 kgs of product, then I have to hire two additional people, right, to produce another 1000 kgs. So my labor cost keep varying. How does this labor cost keep varying? My labor cost will be keep varying, depends on the production. Depends on my production. That is the reason labor comes under variable overhead. Similar way, production, supplies, commission, packaging, all these credit card fees. Why credit card fees is included? If you come to the corporate sector, you will get to know there is a concept called the P card. So this corporate people, what they do for for certain raw materials or certain packing materials or certain suppliers, what they do, they go and swipe the card and get the raw materials immediately for the production purpose, and whatever fees we paid for credit card fees, that also to be added to the raw material cost, because that is also a variable cost for us. That is the reason credit card fees is also included here. So what we need to understand here is there should be a systematic allocation of expenses to the cost. What are those systematic allocation? Systematic allocation of overheads are divided into two categories: fixed overheads and variable overheads. As an accountant, you should know what is my fixed overhead, what is my variable overhead. Fixed overheads are nothing but your salary, rent, property taxes, depreciation. These are all the fixed overheads. Variable overheads are nothing but your raw material cost, labor, and production supplies, and all these things will commission. All these things will be considered as your variable cost. So this should be considered for cost of conversion. That is also to be added to your purchase cost. Are you getting my point? Then apart from that, you also need to take other costs into account. What are the other costs? There could be some administrative expenses need to be incurred to bring the raw material to your manufacturing unit, right? It's not that only direct labor is required. There could be some people, administrative people, directly working on, getting this raw material to your business, from supplier location to your, manufacturing location. So those administrative overheads also to be considered into account. It may include administrative overheads incurred to bring the inventory into present location and condition, or any cost especially incurred on inventory of specified customer. Interest and other borrowing costs are generally not included in the cost of inventory. Generally, interest and borrowing costs are not supposed to be included, but there are some exceptions to this. Why interest and borrowing costs? That's a financial cost. Interest and borrowing cost is nothing but it's a financial cost. It is not a direct expenditure. It is not a direct expenditure to the production. It is a financial cost. Financial cost is not supposed to be included to the part of cost of purchase, but in certain cases they will take into account. Those examples are given here. However, in some circumstances where production process is longer, if the production process is longer, which cases production process will be longer? For example, if somebody is manufacturing wine will take time for us to produce, right? So those wine, rice, and timber, these cases, what will happen? This financial, though the interest and borrowing cost is a financial expenditure, in these kind of industries, what they do, they will take that also into cost of purchase. We can take cost, these financial expenses also to be considered as a cost of purchase. So when we are calculating the cost, we have to be very careful in terms of considering what type of cost to be included as a part of cost of purchase. In case of cost of purchase, all cost of purchase has to be included, excluding trade discount, duty drawbacks, and rebates, and cost of conversion also to be taken into account. When we are talking about the cost of conversion, we have to be very clear in terms of distribution of overheads. What are those distribution of overheads? Fixed overheads and variable overheads. We have given the examples of fixed overheads and variable overheads. Please be very careful, and there should be some basis for allocating these expenses as well. So let us focus on that as well. And there are some other costs also to be included into account, like administrative overheads and financial costs. Generally, financial expenditure is not supposed to be included, but in exceptional cases like wine manufacturing or paddy and other cases, timber industries, generally because the process will take a lengthy time, right? So in those industries, what they do, we generally take financial expenses also into account, for the purpose of calculating the cost of purchase. So I hope you understood the meaning of cost, how to calculate the cost. So right now, what I'm going to conclude here is, you should know how to calculate the cost and how to calculate the net realizable value. Net realizable value for raw materials, how we need to calculate; for WIP, how we need to calculate; for finished product, how we need to calculate. We understood. Similar way, cost of purchase. Cost of purchase also has to be taken into three parts. One, total cost of purchase, all cost of purchase we need to take into account. Cost of conversion we have to take into account, and there are some other costs also to be taken into account. So that is how the cost has to be calculated. Now, once you know the cost, once you know the net realizable value of your inventory, you need to compare these two, and whichever is lower has to be taken into account for the purpose of inventory valuation. Are clear? I hope you are clear on this topic. In case if you have any doubts or questions, please comment on my video. I will definitely come back to you with respective answers. Right? Thank you so much.